The sound of leather on flesh echoed through the quiet Montana town square, followed by Katherine Lawson's defiant cry as she fell to her knees. Blood trickled from her split lip, but her green eyes remained ablaze with the same fire that had gotten her into trouble in the first place. "That'll teach you to speak out of turn, woman," Mayor Thompson bellowed, his face purple with rage as he loomed over her trembling form. "No respectable lady questions a man's authority in public." Katherine clutched her stinging cheek, her honey blonde hair falling in disarray around her shoulders. The small crowd of onlookers shifted uncomfortably, but not one person stepped forward to help her. In Willow Creek, Montana, 1878, a woman challenging a man, especially one as powerful as Mayor Thompson, was unheard of. "The land deed clearly states that property belongs to the Cheyenne people," Katherine said, her voice unwavering despite her position. "You have no right." Another slap silenced her words but not her resolve. She tasted copper and felt her vision blur, but she refused to cry. At 22, Katherine had endured too much to break under a bully's hand. "Someone get this troublemaker out of my sight before I have her thrown in jail." Thompson barked, straightening his expensive waistcoat. The crowd parted as a tall figure stepped forward. Katherine looked up, expecting to see the sheriff coming to arrest her. Instead, she found herself staring into the most startling blue eyes she'd ever seen. "I reckon that's enough," the stranger said, his voice low and steady as he positioned himself between Katherine and the mayor. Dust coated his worn leather boots, and his clothes spoke of long days on the trail. A cowboy passing through town perhaps, but with a quiet authority that made even Thompson hesitate. "This doesn't concern you, stranger," Thompson warned. The cowboy didn't move. "A man hitting a lady always concerns me." He extended a hand toward Katherine. "You all right, madam?" Katherine stared at his outstretched hand, calloused and strong. Taking it would mean accepting help, something her pride rebelled against, but something in his gaze respect, not pity, made her reach up and place her fingers in his. As he helped her to her feet, he leaned close enough that only she could hear his next words. "You're the one I've been waiting for," Katherine's breath caught. Not because of the romantic implication, surely he couldn't mean it that way, but because of the certainty in his voice, as if he'd recognized something in her that others couldn't see. "This isn't over, Miss Lawson," Mayor Thompson sneered, backing away. "And you, cowboy, you'd best be moving on if you know what's good for you." The stranger merely nodded, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. Katherine became acutely aware that he was still holding her hand, and she gently pulled away. "Thank you," she said, straightening her shoulders, "but I don't need saving." A hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Never thought you did, madam. Isaiah Cooper," he introduced himself with a slight tip of his hat. "Katherine Lawson," she replied, though she suspected he already knew her name from the mayor's shouting. "Miss Lawson," Isaiah said, "I'd be much obliged if you'd allow me to walk you home. Seems like you might have more to say about that land deed, and I'm mighty curious to hear it." Katherine hesitated. She'd learned the hard way not to trust strangers, especially men with charming smiles, but there was something different about Isaiah Cooper, something that made her think he might actually listen. "Very well, Mr. Cooper," she finally agreed. "But fair warning, I have plenty to say, and most folks around here don't care to hear it." Isaiah's smile widened, revealing a small dimple in his right cheek. "I ain't most folks, Miss Lawson." As they walked away from the town square, Katherine could feel the stares boring into her back. Her reputation in Willow Creek had never been stellar, the unmarried schoolteacher with radical ideas about equality and women's rights, but after today's confrontation, she'd be lucky if any parents still allowed their children in her classroom. "You're bleeding," Isaiah observed as they turned onto the quieter street leading to the modest house Katherine rented on the edge of town. She touched her lips self-consciously. "It's nothing." "Didn't say it was," he replied, "just making an observation." Katherine studied him from the corner of her eye. Isaiah Cooper stood over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered with sun-bronzed skin that spoke of years under the open sky. His dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, and a few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense. His nose had clearly been broken at least once, and a thin scar ran along his left temple, but there was something undeniably compelling about him. "What brings you to Willow Creek, Mr. Cooper?" she asked. "We don't get many strangers passing through." "Call me Isaiah," he said, "and I'm looking for something." "What might that be?" He glanced at her, those piercing blue eyes seeming to see right through her carefully constructed defenses. "Truth." Katherine couldn't help but laugh, immediately regretting it as pain shot through her split lip. "Truth, that's a rather poetic quest for a cowboy. You'd be surprised what a man might search for after 10 years on the trail," Isaiah replied, his tone light but his eyes serious. They reached Katherine's small house, its white paint peeling and the front garden overgrown with wildflowers she never had time to tame. She stopped at the gate, suddenly uncertain. Inviting a strange man into her home would be scandalous, even by her liberal standards. Isaiah seemed to read her thoughts. "I won't impose on your hospitality, Miss Lawson, but I would like to hear about that land deed if you're willing to tell me." Katherine hesitated only briefly before making a decision. "Wait here," she said, then disappeared inside. She returned moments later with a damp cloth pressed to her lip and a rolled parchment in her hand. "This is a copy," she explained, unrolling it across the fence post between them. "The original treaty was signed in 1862 between the U.S. government and the Northern Cheyenne. It clearly designates the Eastern Valley as tribal land." Isaiah studied the document carefully, his fingers tracing the boundaries described in the faded ink. "And Mayor Thompson wants this land. He's already sold it to the railroad," Katherine said bitterly. "They'll begin construction within the month, displacing the few Cheyenne families still living there. When I discovered the treaty in the county records and brought it to his attention, he didn't take kindly to being challenged," Isaiah finished for her. "Especially not by a woman," Katherine added. "The town council dismissed my concerns without even examining the evidence. When I tried to speak at today's town meeting, well..." She gestured to her bruised face. Isaiah's expression darkened. "No man has the right to strike a woman, treaty or no treaty." "And yet they do, with alarming regularity and little consequence," Katherine said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Mayor Thompson is merely the most recent in a long line of men who believe silence can be beaten into those they consider beneath them." Isaiah's gaze held hers. "You don't strike me as someone easily silenced, Miss Lawson." Despite everything, Katherine felt a small smile tug at her injured lip. "No, Mr. Cooper, I'm not." "Isaiah," he reminded her. "Isaiah," she conceded. "And you may call me Katherine, though most in town call me troublemaker, agitator, or worse." "Katherine suits you better," he said simply. A comfortable silence fell between them as Isaiah continued studying the treaty. Katherine found herself watching his hands, strong but gentle, as they handled the delicate document, much like how they'd helped her to her feet in the town square. "Have you shown this to the Cheyenne families?" he finally asked. Katherine nodded. "Their elder, Gray Wolf, has been trying to get an audience with the territorial governor, but without success. The railroad has powerful friends." Isaiah carefully rolled the document and handed it back to her. "And what about you, Katherine?" "You have powerful friends," she laughed, a hollow sound. "I have books and principles which aren't particularly useful against fists and firearms." "Don't underestimate either," Isaiah said. He glanced toward the setting sun, then back at her. "I should find lodging for the night." "Is there an inn in town?" "Mrs. Holloway runs a boarding house 2 streets over," Katherine said, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "But I should warn you, after standing up for me today, you might not receive the warmest welcome." Isaiah shrugged. "Wouldn't be the first time." Katherine clutched the treaty to her chest. "Why did you intervene? You don't know me, and getting on Thompson's bad side won't make your stay in Willow Creek pleasant." For a moment, Isaiah looked past her, as if seeing something in the distance that she couldn't. "Some things a man can't walk away from," he finally said. "Seeing you stand your ground against that crowd, one woman speaking truth, even as they tried to silence you," he shook his head slightly. I've been searching a long time for someone who believes in something that strongly. Hence your quest for truth? Katherine asked, trying to ignore the way her heart quickened at his words. Isaiah's smile returned, warming his eyes. Something like that. As he tipped his hat and turned to leave, Katherine found herself calling after him. The schoolhouse. Tomorrow morning, if you're interested in learning more about the treaty situation. He paused, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. I'll be there, Katherine Lawson. As she watched him walk away, Katherine pressed her fingers to her split lip, feeling the sting of pain that grounded her in reality. Isaiah Cooper was a stranger passing through town, nothing more. His interest in the treaty likely stemmed from simple curiosity or perhaps a personal sense of justice. Either way, she couldn't afford to read more into his kindness. Yet as she entered her empty house, his words echoed in her mind. You're the one I've been waiting for. Katherine shook her head at her own foolishness. A woman approaching spinsterhood in a frontier town couldn't indulge in such fanciful thinking. She had a treaty to defend and a position to protect if she still had one after today's confrontation. Romance had no place in her practical life. Even if it arrived in the form of a blue-eyed cowboy with a voice that sounded like home. Dawn broke over Willow Creek with streaks of pink and gold that belied the tension simmering beneath the town's quiet facade. Katherine arrived at the schoolhouse early, her split lip throbbing despite the witch hazel she'd applied and her cheek sporting an impressive bruise. She'd chosen her most severe dress, high-necked navy blue with practical buttons, and pinned her hair in a tight bun. If she couldn't hide the evidence of yesterday's altercation, she would at least present herself with dignity. The one-room schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple wooden structure with a small bell tower and windows that let in the morning light. Katherine loved it here among the neat rows of desks and shelves of precious books she'd collected over the years. Teaching had been her salvation when she'd arrived in Willow Creek 4 years ago, alone and determined to forge her own path. She was arranging primers on the students' desks when the door creaked open. Katherine turned, expecting Isaiah, but instead found herself facing Eliza Johnson, mother to 8-year-old twins Abigail and Andrew. Mrs. Johnson, Katherine greeted her cautiously. Good morning. Eliza twisted her hands in her apron, avoiding Katherine's gaze. Miss Lawson, I've come to tell you that Abigail and Andrew won't be attending school today, or, she swallowed hard, or any day hereafter. Katherine's stomach dropped, though she'd been expecting this. May I ask why? You know why, Eliza said, finally looking up at Katherine's bruised face. The whole town's talking about your display yesterday. Mayor Thompson visited several families last night. He says you're filling the children's heads with dangerous ideas, that you're unstable. And do you believe that, Mrs. Johnson? Katherine asked quietly, Eliza's eyes filled with tears. What I believe doesn't matter. My husband says the children can't come anymore, and that's that. She moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Miss Lawson, Abigail cried all night. She loves your lessons. After Eliza left, more parents arrived with similar messages. By 8 o'clock, when school would normally begin, Katherine had lost over half her students. She sat at her desk, staring at the empty room, fighting back tears of frustration. This was exactly what Thompson wanted to isolate her, to strip away her livelihood until she had no choice but to leave town or conform. The door opened again, and Katherine straightened, preparing for another uncomfortable conversation. Instead, Isaiah Cooper stood in the doorway, hat in hand, the morning sunlight catching in his dark hair. Rough morning? He asked, taking in her rigid posture and the empty classroom. Katherine managed a tight smile. Word travels fast in small towns. Isaiah stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Mayor Thompson's been busy, I take it. He visited several families last night, warning them about the dangerous schoolteacher corrupting their children, Katherine confirmed, rising from her desk. By week's end, I suspect I'll have no students left. Isaiah's expression darkened. That's his play then, cut you off at the knees, make you desperate enough to back down about the treaty. It's effective, Katherine admitted. Without students, I have no position. Without a position, I have no income. Without income, She gestured to the room around her. All this disappears. What will you do? Isaiah asked, placing his hat on one of the small desks and moving closer to her. Katherine squared her shoulders. Continue fighting, of course. Thompson underestimates how stubborn I can be. A smile tugged at Isaiah's lips. Somehow that doesn't surprise me. For the first time that morning, Katherine felt the knot in her chest loosen slightly. You said you wanted to learn more about the treaty situation. I did, Isaiah confirmed. But first, I'd like to know why it matters so much to you. Most white folks in these parts wouldn't risk their livelihood for a few Cheyenne families. Katherine hesitated, then gestured for Isaiah to sit as she leaned against her desk. When I first came to Willow Creek, I was lost. My father had just died, leaving me with nothing but an education and a stubborn streak. The town needed a teacher, and I needed a fresh start. She glanced out the window toward the distant hills. During my first winter here, I fell ill with pneumonia. The town doctor gave up on me, said I wouldn't last the week. But Morning Star, a Cheyenne healer, heard about the new teacher being sick. She came to my cabin in the middle of a snowstorm with herbs and knowledge passed down through generations. Isaiah listened intently as Katherine continued. She stayed with me for 3 days, never leaving my side. When the fever broke, she taught me about the land which plants heal, which harm, how everything connects. Her people have lived in harmony with this valley for centuries. Katherine's voice grew passionate. And now Thompson wants to drive them out for profit and progress, as if their connection to this place means nothing. You feel indebted to them, Isaiah observed. Katherine shook her head. It's not about debt, it's about justice, about honoring promises made even when it's inconvenient. The government signed that treaty in good faith. Breaking it now is wrong, plain and simple. Isaiah studied her for a long moment. Most folks would say it's not your fight. Most folks say a lot of things, Katherine replied with a hint of defiance, usually while doing nothing. Isaiah's laugh was unexpected, a rich, warm sound that seemed to fill the empty classroom. You remind me of someone I knew long ago. Same fire, same unwillingness to look away when others suffer. Something in his tone made Katherine curious. Who? My mother, Isaiah said, a shadow passing over his features. She died standing up for what she believed in. Katherine's heart constricted. I'm sorry. Isaiah nodded his acknowledgement. It was a long time ago. I was just a boy. Before Katherine could respond, the schoolhouse door burst open. Sheriff Mills stood in the doorway, his weathered face grim beneath his gray mustache. Miss Lawson, he said, deliberately ignoring Isaiah, Mayor Thompson wants to see you at his office. Now, Katherine straightened. I'm afraid I'm busy at the moment, Sheriff. It wasn't a request, Mills said, his hand resting meaningfully on his holstered revolver. And your friend here would be wise to mind his own business. Isaiah rose slowly to his feet. Is there a problem, Sheriff? Mills finally acknowledged him with a cold stare. Town council's called an emergency meeting regarding Miss Lawson's employment. As she's a town employee, her presence is required. Katherine felt a chill run through her. This was happening faster than she'd anticipated. Very well, she said, gathering her shawl. Lead the way. As she moved toward the door, Isaiah caught her arm gently. I'll come with you. That won't be necessary, Mills interrupted. I insist, Isaiah said, his voice pleasant but with an undertone of steel that made the sheriff hesitate. Katherine looked up at Isaiah, surprised by his willingness to become further entangled in her troubles. You don't have to do this. His blue eyes held hers steadily. I know. The walk to the town hall was tense and silent. Katherine was acutely aware of the stares from townspeople as they passed, some curious, others openly hostile. She kept her head high, though her stomach churned with anxiety. The treaty copy was safely tucked into her pocket, a small weight that somehow anchored her. Mayor Thompson was waiting in the council chamber, along with 4 other council members, all men, all property owners, all with investments in the railroad's arrival. Their faces were set in identical expressions of grim determination. Miss Lawson, Thompson said coldly, his gaze flicking to Isaiah with obvious displeasure. This is a closed meeting. Mr. Cooper is here as my witness, Katherine said firmly. Thompson's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue further. Very well, let's make this quick. The council has convened to discuss your continued employment as Willow Creek schoolteacher. Katherine remained standing, hands clasped before her to hide their trembling. On what grounds? Moral turpitude, Thompson replied smoothly, inciting unrest. Undermining the town's economic development. Take your pick. You mean challenging your illegal seizure of treaty-protected land, Katherine countered. One of the councilmen, Harold Wilson, leaned forward. Miss Lawson, your behavior has become increasingly erratic. Parents are concerned about your influence on impressionable minds. My teaching methods and curriculum have never been questioned before, Katherine pointed out. This isn't about your teaching, Thompson snapped. It's about your judgment, your fixation on this supposed treaty has crossed into obsession. Katherine pulled the document from her pocket and unrolled it on the table. There's nothing supposed about it, Mayor. The treaty is real, legally binding, and in direct conflict with your plans for the Eastern Valley. Thompson barely glanced at the parchment. The council has already reviewed your evidence and found it irrelevant. The territorial governor has approved the land sale. Without consulting the Cheyenne representatives, Katherine insisted. That's a violation of enough. Thompson slammed his hand on the table. This meeting isn't about Indian affairs. It's about your position, which the council has unanimously decided to terminate, effective immediately. The words hit Katherine like a physical blow, though she'd been expecting them. 4 years of building a life in Willow Creek, gone in an instant. You can't do that without cause, Isaiah spoke up for the first time, his calm voice a stark contrast to the tension in the room. Thompson's eyes narrowed. And who might you be, exactly? Just a concerned citizen, Isaiah replied evenly. Well, concerned citizen, this town council has every right to dismiss employees who violate the moral standards of our community, Thompson said. Miss Lawson was warned repeatedly to cease her disruptive behavior. Katherine found her voice again. By disruptive behavior, you mean speaking the truth about a legal document that prevents you from profiting off land that isn't yours to sell, Thompson's face reddened. Your position is terminated. You have until the end of the week to vacate the teachers' quarters. That's final. Katherine felt the room spin slightly. The teachers' quarters attached to the schoolhouse were her home, the only home she'd known since her father died. Where am I supposed to go? That's hardly the town's concern, Wilson said dismissively. Isaiah stepped forward. If I might make a suggestion. All eyes turned to him suspiciously. The treaty Miss Lawson has presented deserves proper legal review, he continued, perhaps by the territorial court in Helena. Thompson laughed. And who would bring such a case? You, a drifter passing through town. Isaiah's expression remained impassive. I was thinking more along the lines of Judge William Parker. I believe he still presides over the Territorial Circuit Court. The name had an immediate effect on Thompson, whose face drained of color. You know Judge Parker? We've crossed paths, Isaiah said vaguely. I imagine he'd be very interested in reviewing a potentially violated treaty, especially one that might invalidate a rather profitable railroad deal. Katherine watched this exchange with growing curiosity. Something about Isaiah's manner had changed, a subtle shift in authority that even Thompson seemed to recognize. What exactly are you proposing? Thompson asked warily. A compromise, Isaiah said. Miss Lawson retains her position while the treaty is properly reviewed by the territorial court. If the court finds the land sale valid, she agrees to drop her objections. If not, he let the implication hang in the air. Thompson exchanged glances with the other council members. And what's your interest in all this, Mr. Cooper? Isaiah supplied. Let's just say I have a personal interest in seeing justice served. After a tense moment, Thompson nodded curtly. The council will need to discuss this privately. Of course, Isaiah agreed, placing a gentle hand on Katherine's back to guide her from the room. Once they were alone in the hallway, Katherine turned to him in astonishment. What just happened in there? Do you actually know Judge Parker? Isaiah's eyes crinkled with amusement. William Parker has a reputation for being incorruptible and particularly harsh on land fraud cases. Thompson's reaction tells me all I need to know about the legitimacy of that land deal. So you were bluffing, Katherine asked, impressed despite herself. Not entirely, Isaiah said. I've appeared before Judge Parker's court before. He would indeed be interested in this case. Katherine studied him with new eyes. You're not just a cowboy passing through, are you? Before Isaiah could answer, the council chamber door opened and Thompson emerged, his expression sour. The council has decided to postpone any decision regarding your employment, Miss Lawson, he announced stiffly. You may continue teaching while we explore the legal questions raised today. Katherine could hardly believe what she was hearing. And the Eastern Valley, Thompson's jaw tightened. Construction will be delayed pending review, but make no mistake, this is a temporary reprieve. When this treaty nonsense is resolved, we'll revisit your position. After Thompson stalked away, Katherine turned to Isaiah in amazement. How did you do that? Isaiah shrugged. Men like Thompson only understand two languages, money and power. I simply spoke one he recognized. But who are you really? Katherine pressed. No ordinary cowboy could walk into that room and change their minds so quickly. Isaiah hesitated, then gestured toward the exit. Walk with me. Outside, the midday sun bathed Willow Creek in golden light. They walked in silence until they reached the edge of town, where the main street gave way to rolling grassland dotted with wildflowers. I was a lawyer once, Isaiah finally said, his gaze on the distant mountains. In St. Louis. My father wanted me to follow in his footsteps, respectable profession, respectable life. Katherine waited as he gathered his thoughts. I specialized in Indian affairs, treaty law specifically, he continued. Thought I could make a difference working within the system. A bitter smile crossed his face. I was young and idealistic. What happened? Katherine asked softly. I took on a case similar to this one, contested treaty, valuable land, powerful interests. Evidence disappeared, witnesses changed their testimony, and suddenly I was facing charges of falsifying documents. His voice remained steady, but Katherine could sense the old wound beneath his words. Were you guilty? Isaiah looked at her directly. No. But guilt doesn't matter much when the judge is in someone's pocket. So you left, Katherine surmised. I left, he confirmed. Spent the last 10 years drifting, working ranches, driving cattle, trying to forget what happened in that courtroom, until now, Katherine said. Until Willow Creek. Isaiah's expression softened as he looked at her. Until I saw a woman standing alone against a town full of people who'd rather silence her than hear the truth, made me remember why I became a lawyer in the first place. Katherine felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. And what you said yesterday about waiting for someone like me, I meant it, Isaiah said simply. After years of watching people choose convenience over conscience, finding someone willing to risk everything for what's right. He shook his head slightly. It's rarer than you might think. Katherine wasn't sure how to respond to the intensity in his gaze. This man who had walked into her life just yesterday was looking at her as if he'd found something precious, something he'd given up hoping for. The treaty, she said, redirecting the conversation to safer ground. Do you really think it will hold up in court? Isaiah nodded, accepting her shift in topic. Based on what I've seen, yes, but Thompson won't give up easily. Men like him rarely do. What's our next step then? Katherine asked. Isaiah raised an eyebrow. Katherine felt her cheeks warm. Well, you seem to have involved yourself quite thoroughly in my problems, Mr. Cooper, unless you're planning to continue your drifting ways. Isaiah's smile reached his eyes. I think Willow Creek might be worth staying in for a while, Miss Lawson, at least until we see this treaty business through. Good, Katherine said, surprised by how relieved she felt. Then perhaps we should speak with Gray Wolf. The Cheyenne should be involved in their own defense. Isaiah looked at her with something like admiration. Most white lawyers wouldn't think to include the tribe in the legal strategy. Most white lawyers haven't been saved by Cheyenne medicine, Katherine replied. Besides, it's their land, their fight, we're just allies. Allies, Isaiah repeated, as if testing the word. I like that. As they turned back toward town, Katherine felt a cautious hope blooming within her. Her position was temporarily secure. She had an unexpected ally with legal knowledge. And for the first time since discovering the treaty, she felt they might actually succeed. What she refused to acknowledge was the other feeling taking root alongside that hope, a dangerous, foolish attraction to a man she barely knew, whose blue eyes seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed defenses. Such feelings had no place in her orderly life. Isaiah Cooper was an ally in her fight for justice, nothing more, even if her treacherous heart quickened every time he said her name. The path to the Cheyenne settlement wound through stands of cottonwood trees and across a clear running creek. Katherine led the way, her skirts gathered in one hand to keep them from the damp undergrowth. Isaiah walked beside her, occasionally offering his hand at difficult crossings, which Katherine accepted with murmured thanks. Gray Wolf's family has lived in this valley for generations, Katherine explained as they walked. He's one of the few who refused to move to the reservation after the treaties were signed. His people have adapted. They farm, trade with some of the more open-minded townsfolk, even send their children to my school occasionally. And the town tolerates their presence, Isaiah asked. Katherine's expression darkened. Barely. There's been an uneasy peace, mainly because the valley wasn't considered valuable until the railroad decided to push through. They emerged from the trees to find a small collection of dwellings, some traditional hide tippies, others small log cabins built in the white man's style. Children played near a central fire pit, while women worked at various tasks. Several men were repairing fishing nets by the creek's edge. Their arrival did not go unnoticed. The children stopped playing, watching the newcomers with curious eyes. One of the men set aside his net and approached them. "Katherine," he greeted her with a nod. He appeared to be in his 30s, with keen dark eyes and hair worn in 2 long braids. "We did not expect you today." "Joseph," Katherine replied warmly. "I've brought someone who might be able to help with the land issue. This is Isaiah Cooper." He was once a lawyer specializing in treaty law. Joseph's expression remained guarded as he assessed Isaiah. "My father will want to meet him. Follow me." He led them to the largest of the cabins, where an elderly man sat outside, carving intricate designs into a piece of antler. Despite his age, Gray Wolf's posture was straight, his hands steady. He looked up as they approached, his weathered face creasing into a smile when he saw Katherine. "Teacher," he said, his voice deep and slightly accented, "your face shows the mark of your courage. Thompson has a heavy hand." Katherine touched her bruised cheek self-consciously. "It will heal." Gray Wolf's gaze shifted to Isaiah. "And who is this you bring to our home?" Katherine performed the introductions, explaining Isaiah's background and his intervention with the town council. Gray Wolf listened without interruption, his dark eyes missing nothing. "So," he said when she had finished, "a lawyer who is not a lawyer comes to help with a treaty that the white man's government does not wish to honor." His lips twitched with something like amusement. "The spirits work in strange ways. I can't promise success," Isaiah said honestly, "but I believe your claim is legitimate and I'm willing to help present it to the territorial court." Gray Wolf gestured for them to sit on the bench beside him. "Joseph, bring tea for our guests." Once they were settled with steaming cups of herbal tea, Gray Wolf spoke again. "My grandfather signed this treaty. He believed the white man's paper would protect our land for generations to come." His eyes, though clouded with age, held a sharp intelligence. He was wrong. "Not entirely," Isaiah said. "The paper itself has power if we can get the right people to acknowledge it." "And who are these right people?" Gray Wolf asked. "The same government that has broken every promise made to my people?" Isaiah didn't flinch from the challenge in the elder's voice. "The territorial court has jurisdiction over land disputes. Judge Parker has a reputation for fairness, even in cases involving Indian rights." Gray Wolf studied Isaiah for a long moment. "You have known injustice," he finally said. It wasn't a question. Isaiah nodded once. "Yes." "And you, teacher," Gray Wolf turned to Katherine, "you risk much to stand with us. Already they have marked your body. Next they may take your livelihood." "They tried today," Katherine admitted. Isaiah convinced them to wait until the treaty case is resolved. Gray Wolf's expression softened. "Morning Star was right about you. She said the fever did not take you because your spirit was too stubborn to leave." He chuckled. "A good quality in these times." The mention of the Cheyenne healer made Katherine smile. "How is Morning Star? I haven't seen her in several weeks." "She travels, gathering summer medicines," Gray Wolf replied. "She will return before the next full moon." As they talked, Joseph returned with a rolled hide document which he handed to his father with reverence. Gray Wolf carefully unrolled it, revealing an intricately painted record of the treaty signing. "Our version of the agreement," he explained. "Each picture tells part of the story, the place, the people present, the promises made." Isaiah leaned forward, fascinated. "This would be powerful evidence alongside the written treaty. It shows the Cheyenne understanding of the agreement was the same as what was written in English." Gray Wolf nodded. "I will entrust this to you, teacher, as I have entrusted you with our children's minds." His gaze included Isaiah. "And to you, lawyer who is not a lawyer, because Katherine trusts you." The responsibility of his words weighed heavily on Katherine. "We won't let you down." "Perhaps not," Gray Wolf said, "but you cannot control the hearts of men who hunger for land and gold." He returned the hide document to its protective wrapping. "Joseph will take you to the Eastern Valley. See with your own eyes what Thompson would destroy." As they prepared to leave, Gray Wolf caught Isaiah's sleeve. "She has suffered for her words," he said quietly, nodding toward Katherine, who was speaking with one of the Cheyenne women. "Yet still she speaks. Remember this." Isaiah held the elder's gaze. "I won't forget." Joseph led them through dense woodland until they emerged onto a plateau overlooking the Eastern Valley. Katherine caught her breath at the view. The valley stretched below them in a tapestry of green and gold, bisected by a silver ribbon of river that wound its way between gentle hills. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows in purple and yellow bursts. "It's beautiful," Isaiah said softly. "It's more than beautiful," Joseph replied. "It's life. The river provides fish, the meadows food for game, the forest's medicine and shelter." He pointed to a distant grove of trees. "There lie our ancestors, generations of my people who lived and died in this valley." Katherine had visited the valley before, but seeing it now, knowing it could soon be destroyed for a railroad that would bring more settlers, more demands for land, filled her with renewed determination. "The railroad's planned route would cut directly through the center," she told Isaiah. "They'll divert the river, clear-cut the forests for ties and fuel." Isaiah's jaw tightened as he surveyed the landscape. No wonder Thompson was so quick to sell. This land is worth a fortune. "To some," Joseph said quietly, "to others it is beyond price." They stood in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Katherine found herself watching Isaiah's profile as he studied the valley, noting the way the sunlight caught in his dark hair, the slight furrow between his brows as he considered the legal challenge ahead. As if sensing her gaze, he turned to her. Something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding, a common purpose that transcended their brief acquaintance. "We should head back," Katherine said, breaking the moment. "I need to prepare for tomorrow's classes, assuming I still have students to teach." The walk back to town was mostly silent, each of them processing what they'd seen and heard. Joseph left them at the edge of the settlement with a promise to bring any messages from Gray Wolf directly to Katherine's house. As they neared Willow Creek, Isaiah finally spoke. "You've built something rare here, Katherine, a bridge between two worlds." "Not a very sturdy one," she replied. "A few harsh words from the mayor and half the town withdraws their children from my care." "But not all," Isaiah pointed out. "Some parents stood by you." Katherine hadn't thought of it that way. "I suppose you're right." They reached the edge of town just as the sun was beginning to set, painting Willow Creek's weathered buildings in golden light. Katherine suddenly realized how tired she was, the events of the past 2 days catching up with her all at once. "Thank you," she said, turning to Isaiah, "for everything. I don't know what would have happened today if you hadn't been there." Isaiah smiled, that small dimple appearing in his right cheek. "I have a feeling you would have found a way through, with or without me. You don't strike me as someone who gives up easily." "Still," Katherine insisted, "I'm grateful." They had reached the schoolhouse, its windows dark in the fading light. Katherine hesitated at the steps, suddenly reluctant to say goodbye. "Will I see you tomorrow?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual. I thought I might sit in on your class if that's permitted, Isaiah replied. See this famous teaching in action, Katherine laughed. Famous might be an overstatement, but you're welcome to observe, though I warn you it may be a small group. Isaiah's expression grew serious. Katherine, whatever happens with the treaty case with your position, you should be proud of what you've built here. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. I'm not used to having someone in my corner, she admitted. It's nice. Get used to it, Isaiah said softly. Good night, Katherine. Good night, Isaiah, as she watched him walk toward Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. Katherine tried to make sense of the feelings stirring within her. In just 2 days, Isaiah Cooper had upended her carefully ordered world. She'd spent years building walls around her heart, focusing solely on her teaching and her principles. Now those walls were beginning to crumble, and Katherine wasn't sure whether to shore them up or let them fall. The following morning brought unexpected challenges. Katherine arrived at the schoolhouse to find the door ajar and the interior in disarray. Books had been pulled from shelves, desks overturned, and scrawled across the blackboard in crude letters were the words "Indian lover go home." She stood frozen in the doorway, shock giving way to a cold anger that settled in her chest. This was no childish prank, this was deliberate intimidation. Katherine, Isaiah's voice came from behind her. He moved past her into the room, his expression darkening as he took in the damage. Who did this? Take your pick, Katherine said bitterly, entering the classroom and righting a fallen chair. Half the town probably approves, even if they didn't wield the chalk themselves. Isaiah began picking up scattered books. Have you had trouble like this before? Nothing this blatant, Katherine admitted, running her fingers over a torn map of the Montana Territory. Anonymous notes, whispers behind my back, but this, she gestured to the destruction, this is new. They worked in silence for several minutes, restoring order to the chaos. Katherine was erasing the hateful message from the blackboard when the first student arrived, 10-year-old Emma Sullivan, whose eyes widened at the state of the classroom. Miss Lawson, what happened? She gasped. Katherine forced a smile. Just a bit of mischief, Emma, nothing to worry about. Would you help Mr. Cooper set the primers on the desks? By the time the school bell rang, only 7 students had arrived, less than a third of her usual class. Katherine's heart sank, but she maintained a cheerful demeanor as she led them through their morning lessons. Isaiah sat at the back of the room, observing quietly as she taught reading to the younger children while the older ones worked on arithmetic problems. Despite the reduced numbers, the familiar rhythm of teaching soothed Katherine's frayed nerves. She moved between desks, offering encouragement here, a gentle correction there. Occasionally, she caught Isaiah watching her with an expression that made her cheeks warm. At midday, she dismissed the children for lunch, instructing them to eat outside in the spring sunshine. When the last student had bounded out the door, Katherine sank into her chair with a sigh. That bad? Isaiah asked, moving to perch on the edge of her desk. 7 students, Katherine said, out of 23, and I suspect there will be fewer tomorrow. Isaiah studied her bruised face, which looked even more dramatic against her pale complexion. You're exhausted. I'm fine, she insisted, though in truth she'd barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts of the treaty, her precarious position, and the blue-eyed former lawyer who had so unexpectedly entered her life. Katherine, Isaiah said gently, you can't fight every battle alone. I'm not alone, she pointed out. You're here. For now, he agreed. But what happens when this case is resolved one way or another? Who stands with you then? The question hit closer to home than Katherine wanted to admit. I've managed on my own for 4 years. At what cost? Isaiah pressed. Before she could answer, the schoolhouse door banged open. Sheriff Mills stood there, his expression grim. Miss Lawson, he said curtly, there's been an incident at the Cheyenne settlement. You'd better come. Katherine's blood ran cold. What kind of incident? Fire, Mills replied. Started in one of the cabins about an hour ago. No one was hurt, but Katherine was already on her feet, gathering her shawl. But what? It was Gray Wolf's cabin, Mills said, avoiding her eyes. The treaty pictograph was destroyed. Katherine felt as though she'd been struck. "That's not an incident, Sheriff, that's arson, deliberate destruction of evidence." Mill's expression hardened. "I'm just delivering the message, Miss Lawson. What you make of it is your business." "We'll need to speak with Grey Wolf," Isaiah said, already moving toward the door. "And who will watch my students?" Katherine demanded, gesturing toward the children playing outside. Isaiah paused, clearly torn between the need to investigate the fire and Katherine's responsibilities. "I'll go," he decided. "You stay with the children, I'll bring back whatever information I can." Katherine wanted to protest but knew he was right. "Be careful," she said instead. "Whoever did this may still be in the area." Isaiah nodded, then followed Sheriff Mills out of the schoolhouse. Katherine watched them go, a heavy dread settling in her stomach. The vandalism of her classroom suddenly seemed like a minor prelude to a much larger campaign of intimidation. The afternoon dragged by, Katherine's mind only half on her lessons as she worried about what was happening at the Cheyenne settlement. When the final bell rang at 3 o'clock, she quickly dismissed the children, asking Emma Sullivan to carry a note to her parents explaining that school would be closed the following day. She was cleaning the blackboard when she heard footsteps on the wooden floor behind her. Turning, she expected to see Isaiah, but instead found Mayor Thompson standing in the center of the room. "Miss Lawson," he said, twirling his hat in his hands with a false air of contrition, "I've just heard about the unfortunate vandalism of your classroom, most distressing." Katherine set down the eraser, wiping chalk dust from her hands. "Is it? I rather thought it might please you, considering your opinion of my teaching." Thompson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Now, whatever our disagreements, I would never condone the destruction of town property." "Just Cheyenne property, then?" Katherine challenged. Like Grey Wolf's cabin, Thompson's expression hardened. "I had nothing to do with that unfortunate accident." "Accident," Katherine repeated incredulously. "The cabin of the one man who holds evidence against your land deal just happens to catch fire." "Careful, Miss Lawson," Thompson warned. "Accusations of arson are serious matters." Katherine took a steadying breath. "What do you want, Mayor?" Thompson moved closer, setting his hat on one of the student desks. "To offer you a way out of this mess you've created, a compromise, if you will." "I'm listening," Katherine said warily. "The town council is prepared to guarantee your position as teacher with an increase in salary if you'll publicly withdraw your objections to the railroad development." Katherine stared at him in disbelief. "You're trying to bribe me," Thompson shrugged. "I prefer to see it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. You keep your school, your home, your reputation. The town gets the economic boost the railroad will bring. Everyone wins. Except the Cheyenne, who lose their ancestral lands," Katherine pointed out. "And what about the treaty, the law?" "Treaties can be reinterpreted," Thompson said dismissively. "It happens all the time. As for the law," he spread his hands. "The territorial governor has already approved the land sale. His authority supersedes some moldering document from decades ago." Katherine felt a chill at the casual way he dismissed both justice and the Cheyenne people's rights. "And if I refuse your generous offer?" Thompson's smile vanished. "Then I can't guarantee your safety, Miss Lawson. Tensions are running high. Today it was your classroom and Grey Wolf's cabin. Tomorrow—" He let the threat hang in the air. "Are you threatening me?" Katherine asked, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. "Warning you," Thompson corrected. "There are powerful interests invested in this railroad, Miss Lawson. Men who won't be stopped by a schoolteacher and a drifter playing lawyer." Before Katherine could respond, the door opened again. Isaiah stood there, his clothes smelling of smoke, his expression hardening when he saw Thompson. "Mayor," he said coldly. "Paying your respects after the fire you ordered." Thompson turned, his face flushing. "I don't know what tales the Indians have been spinning, Cooper, but I had nothing to do with that unfortunate incident." "Funny," Isaiah said, stepping into the room. Witnesses saw 3 men riding away from the settlement right after the fire started. One was on a distinctive black stallion with white stockings. His eyes narrowed. "A horse much like the one you rode in the Founders' Day parade last year." Thompson's face drained of color, then reddened with anger. "How dare you? I was in my office all morning. Ask my secretary." "The same secretary who depends on you for her livelihood," Isaiah asked mildly. "I'm sure her testimony would be completely unbiased." Katherine watched this exchange with growing alarm. Isaiah was openly accusing the most powerful man in Willow Creek of arson, a dangerous move without solid proof. "I think you should leave, Mayor," she said firmly. "Our conversation is finished." Thompson retrieved his hat, jamming it onto his head with barely controlled fury. "Think about my offer, Miss Lawson. You have until tomorrow to decide." He turned to Isaiah. "As for you, stranger, your interference in town matters has been tolerated long enough. I suggest you move on before something unfortunate happens." After Thompson stormed out, Katherine sagged against her desk. "That was dangerously direct," she told Isaiah. "He won't forget what you just said." "Good," Isaiah replied grimly. "I want him looking over his shoulder, wondering what we know." He moved closer, his expression softening with concern. "Are you all right? What did he want?" Katherine explained Thompson's offer, watching Isaiah's face darken with each word. "He's desperate," she concluded. "The fire was meant to destroy evidence and frighten the Cheyenne, but it's not working as he planned." "Gray Wolf refused to be intimidated," Isaiah confirmed. "He's calling a council meeting tonight to discuss next steps. We're invited." Katherine gathered her things, determination replacing her earlier fatigue. "Then we shouldn't keep them waiting." As they left the schoolhouse, Katherine was acutely aware of eyes watching from windows and doorways. Word of the fire had spread through town, along with rumors of Isaiah's accusation against the mayor. Willow Creek was taking sides, and Katherine feared the dividing line would only grow deeper. "Isaiah," she said quietly as they walked, "what if Thompson is right? What if pursuing this case puts people in danger, the Cheyenne, my remaining students, even you?" Isaiah stopped, turning to face her fully. "Katherine, people are already in danger. Gray Wolf's cabin is ashes. Your classroom was vandalized. You were struck in public for speaking the truth." His eyes held her steadily. Giving in to threats only guarantees more threats. Katherine knew he was right, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. "I just don't want anyone else to get hurt because of me. Because of you," Isaiah repeated. "This isn't because of you, Katherine. It's because of men like Thompson who believe their greed matters more than other people's lives." He gently touched her bruised cheek. "You didn't cause this. You're just brave enough to stand against it." His touch sent warmth spreading through her, chasing away some of the cold dread that had settled in her chest. "When you put it that way, I sound almost heroic." Isaiah's smile returned, warming his blue eyes. "There's nothing almost about it." Before Katherine could respond to the admiration in his gaze, a shout from down the street drew their attention. Joseph was running toward them, his expression urgent. "Katherine, Cooper," he called. "Come quickly, the sheriff is at the settlement. He's arresting my father." The Cheyenne settlement was in an uproar when they arrived. Sheriff Mills and 2 deputies had Gray Wolf in handcuffs, while the community gathered around in angry protest. Children cried, women shouted, and several of the men looked ready to physically intervene. "Sheriff." Katherine called out, pushing through the crowd with Isaiah close behind. "What is the meaning of this?" Mills looked uncomfortable but determined. "Gray Wolf is being charged with inciting violence against the town of Willow Creek." "That's absurd," Isaiah said flatly. "What evidence do you have?" "A witness claims Gray Wolf sent braves to vandalize the schoolhouse this morning," Mills replied, not meeting Katherine's incredulous gaze. "That's a lie," she said firmly. "The Cheyenne would never damage my classroom. They value education too highly." "Nevertheless," Mills continued, "I have a sworn statement and orders to bring him in." He looked genuinely regretful. "I'm just doing my job, Miss Lawson." Isaiah moved closer to the sheriff, lowering his voice. "This is Thompson's doing. You know it as well as I do." Mills shifted uncomfortably. "The mayor presented evidence. I have to act on it." "What evidence?" Katherine demanded. "Hearsay from some unnamed witness, Sheriff," Isaiah said, his lawyer's training evident in his controlled tone. "Arresting a respected elder on flimsy charges will only escalate tensions." Let me speak with Judge Parker. If there's legitimate evidence, Grey Wolf will answer the charges properly. Mills hesitated, clearly torn between his duty and his sense of right and wrong. The judge isn't due in Willow Creek for another 3 weeks. Then I'll ride to Helena tomorrow, Isaiah countered. Grey Wolf isn't going anywhere. He can remain here under house arrest if you're concerned. That's not procedure, Mills began. Neither is arresting a man based on obviously fabricated charges, Isaiah interrupted. Sheriff, you know this isn't right. A tense silence fell over the settlement as everyone waited for Mills' decision. Finally, he sighed heavily. 3 days, he said, removing the handcuffs from Grey Wolf's wrists. Cooper rides to Helena tomorrow. If he returns with documentation from Judge Parker supporting your petition for a proper hearing, Grey Wolf remains free until trial. He fixed Isaiah with a stern look. But if you don't return in 3 days, I'll have no choice but to take him in. Understood? Isaiah nodded. Thank you, Sheriff. As Mills and his deputies departed, the tension in the settlement slowly dissipated. Grey Wolf rubbed his wrists, his dignity intact despite the humiliation of the attempted arrest. It seems Thompson grows desperate, he observed calmly. He fears what we might do. With good reason, Isaiah said. Between the written treaty, your pictograph record, the pictograph is gone, Joseph reminded him bitterly. Burned with our home, but not forgotten, Grey Wolf said. I can recreate it from memory. And there is something else, something Thompson does not know we possess. He beckoned them to follow him to one of the other cabins, where an elderly woman sat mending clothing. At Grey Wolf's request, she reached beneath her bed and withdrew a small metal box. This belonged to my grandfather, Grey Wolf explained, opening it carefully. Inside lay a folded document yellowed with age. The original treaty with signatures and seals intact, Katherine gasped. You had it all along. I thought the copy in the county records was the only one. Grey Wolf's eyes twinkled. My people have learned to keep what is precious hidden from white men's eyes. I did not show this to you before because I needed to be certain of your hearts. Isaiah carefully examined the document. This is extraordinary. The original treaty with government seals, signatures from both U.S. officials and Cheyenne leaders. This will be powerful evidence in court. Then you must take it to your judge, Grey Wolf decided. Along with the copy of the government version, show him that both tell the same story. Isaiah looked concerned. This is your people's most important document. Are you certain you want to entrust it to me? Grey Wolf studied him intently. You have walked in 2 worlds, lawyer who is not a lawyer. You understand the white man's law, but your heart knows justice. Yes, I entrust this to you. He turned to Katherine, and to teacher who has proven her courage. Katherine felt the weight of his trust like a physical thing. I'll guard it with my life, she promised. Now, Grey Wolf said, his tone lighter, we must prepare for your journey. The path to Helena is long and not without danger. As preparations were made for Isaiah's departure at dawn, Katherine found herself torn between hope and anxiety. The original treaty was a powerful piece of evidence that could sway even the most skeptical judge, but Isaiah would be traveling alone through territory where Thompson might have allies. I should come with you, she said as they walked back toward town in the fading light. Isaiah shook his head. Your place is here, Katherine. The children need you, and someone needs to keep an eye on Thompson. But the treaty will be safer if we're not traveling together, Isaiah pointed out. If Thompson's men are watching the roads, one rider has a better chance of slipping through unnoticed than 2. Katherine knew he was right, but the thought of him facing potential danger alone troubled her more than she wanted to admit. 3 days isn't much time, she said instead. Helena is nearly 100 miles away. I'll ride hard, Isaiah promised. With luck, I'll be back before the deadline with Judge Parker's order protecting Grey Wolf and halting any development until a proper hearing. They had reached the edge of town, where their paths would diverge. Isaiah to the boarding house to prepare for his journey, Katherine to the schoolhouse to spend another restless night. Isaiah, she said, suddenly afraid this might be the last time they spoke privately. Be careful. Thompson has too much to lose to play fair. In the golden light of sunset, Isaiah's eyes seemed to catch fire. I've faced worse than corrupt town mayors, Katherine. Have you? She asked, genuinely curious about the past he rarely mentioned. A shadow crossed his face. Yes. But that's a story for another time. He reached out, gently tucking a strand of honey blonde hair behind her ear. When I return, the simple gesture sent a shiver through Katherine that had nothing to do with the evening chill. When you return, she agreed. They stood there for a moment longer than necessary, neither quite willing to say goodbye. Finally, Isaiah broke the spell. Lock your doors tonight, he advised, and keep that derringer of yours close. Katherine raised an eyebrow. How did you know about my derringer? Isaiah's smile returned. You strike me as a woman who believes in both principles and practicality. He tipped his hat. Until I return, Katherine Lawson. Until then, Isaiah Cooper. As she watched him walk away, Katherine felt an unexpected ache in her chest. In just 3 days, this man had become important to her in ways she wasn't quite ready to examine. She told herself it was merely the alliance they'd formed, the common cause that bound them together. But as she turned toward the schoolhouse, she knew she was lying to herself. There was something about Isaiah Cooper that had slipped past her carefully constructed defenses, something that made her both terrified and exhilarated at the prospect of his return. The following morning dawned with heavy gray clouds that matched Katherine's mood. She arrived at the schoolhouse early, unsurprised to find it empty of students. Word of Gray Wolf's near arrest had likely spread through town, giving reluctant parents another reason to keep their children away. She was arranging books on recently repaired shelves when the door opened. Katherine turned, expecting more trouble, but instead found Emma Sullivan and her mother standing in the doorway. Good morning, Katherine said cautiously. Mrs. Sullivan stepped forward, her expression determined beneath her bonnet. Miss Lawson, I've come to tell you that Emma won't be attending classes for a while. Katherine's heart sank, though she'd been expecting this. I understand. No, I don't think you do, Mrs. Sullivan continued. Emma won't be attending because we're leaving town. My husband and I, we don't agree with how things are being handled here. Leaving, Katherine repeated in surprise. Mrs. Sullivan nodded. Thomas, my husband, he spoke up at the saloon last night, said what happened to Gray Wolf wasn't right. Some men took exception. Her mouth tightened. They made it clear our business wouldn't be welcome anymore. Thomas Sullivan was Willow Creek's only cobbler. His departure would leave a significant gap in the town's services. I'm sorry, Katherine said sincerely. Where will you go? My sister's in Bozeman, Mrs. Sullivan replied. We'll start fresh there. She hesitated, then added, Miss Lawson, there are others who think like us. Not everyone agrees with Thompson, but they're afraid to speak up. Then why are you telling me this? Katherine asked. Because my daughter admires you, Mrs. Sullivan said simply. And because Thomas says a town that turns against its own conscience won't prosper for long. After they left, Katherine sat at her desk, considering this new development. The Sullivans' departure was a sobering reminder of Thompson's growing power, but also evidence that not everyone in Willow Creek supported his methods. The day stretched endlessly before her, with no students to teach. Katherine used the time to record everything she knew about the treaty situation, creating a detailed account that could be used in court if necessary. By mid-afternoon, restlessness drove her outside. Willow Creek seemed unusually quiet as she walked its main street. Several people crossed to the opposite boardwalk when they saw her coming, while others offered nervous nods before hurrying on their way. Outside the general store, a small group of men fell silent as she passed, their eyes following her with undisguised hostility. Katherine kept her head high, though her heart pounded uncomfortably. The town had endured its share of conflicts before disputes over water rights, property boundaries, even religious differences, but never had she felt this sense of division, as if an invisible line had been drawn with increasingly clear sides. Her feet carried her to the telegraph office, where she hoped to send a message to Isaiah and Helena, only to find the operator, Mr. Patterson, unusually cool. Sorry, Miss Lawson, he said without meeting her eyes. The line to Helena is down, storm damage, they say. When do you expect it to be repaired? Katherine asked. Patterson shrugged. Hard to say, could be days. Katherine didn't believe him for a moment. The sky had been clear until this morning, and the light rain that had fallen wasn't nearly enough to damage telegraph lines. Thompson was isolating her, cutting off her ability to communicate with Isaiah. As she turned to leave, Patterson called after her in a lowered voice. "Miss Lawson, if you was needing to send an urgent message, Billy Jenkins rides to Fort Harrison every other day with mail. He's leaving tomorrow morning." Katherine looked back in surprise at this unexpected help. "Thank you, Mr. Patterson." He nodded once, then busied himself with his equipment as if afraid to be caught showing her kindness. Katherine returned to the schoolhouse increasingly uneasy. With Isaiah gone and communication limited, she felt vulnerable in a way she hadn't before. Perhaps it would be wiser to stay with one of the Cheyenne families until Isaiah returned with the judge's order. She was gathering essential items when a knock at the door startled her. Katherine approached cautiously, her hand moving to the pocket where she kept her small derringer. "Who is it?" she called. "Joseph," came the reply. "I bring news." Katherine opened the door to find Gray Wolf's son looking grave. "What's happened?" "Men have been watching the trails to Helena," Joseph reported. "4 riders left town shortly after Cooper departed. My cousin followed them to Split Rock Canyon. They are waiting there." Katherine's blood ran cold. Split Rock Canyon was the narrowest point on the main trail to Helena, a perfect place for an ambush. Isaiah took that route, she realized aloud. Joseph nodded. "If he reaches the canyon by nightfall, he rides into a trap. We have to warn him," Katherine said, already reaching for her shawl. "Is there another way to Helena, a trail he could take instead?" "There is an old hunting path through the mountains," Joseph said. "Longer, but it bypasses the canyon. My cousin rides there now to mark the trail, but he cannot reach Cooper before he enters the canyon." Katherine made a swift decision. "I'll go. I know these hills from gathering herbs with Morning Star. If I ride now, I might intercept him before he reaches the ambush." Joseph looked doubtful. "It is dangerous. Thompson's men watch the main roads." "Then I won't take the main roads," Katherine said firmly. She might be a schoolteacher, but she'd grown up on a farm in Pennsylvania and had been riding since childhood. "Can you help me prepare?" An hour later, Katherine was mounted on a sturdy paint horse borrowed from Joseph's cousin. She wore a buckskin jacket and trousers lent by one of the Cheyenne women practical clothing that would allow her to ride hard without the encumbrance of skirts. Her honey blonde hair was tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and the precious treaty documents were secure in a waterproof pouch strapped across her chest. "Follow Elk Creek north," Joseph instructed as she prepared to leave. "When you reach the lightning-struck pine, turn west toward the Twin Peaks. Cooper should pass through that valley before reaching the canyon." Katherine nodded, committing the landmarks to memory. "And if I miss him," Joseph's expression was grim, "then ride to Helena yourself. The treaty must reach the judge, even if Cooper cannot." The reality of what she was undertaking settled heavily on Katherine's shoulders. She was leaving behind everything familiar to ride through difficult terrain, possibly pursued by men who wouldn't hesitate to harm her. "Joseph," she said as she gathered the reins, "if I don't return, you will return," he interrupted with conviction. "With Cooper and the judge's order." Katherine wished she shared his confidence. "Tell Gray Wolf I'm honored by his trust." With that, she urged her mount forward, leaving Willow Creek behind as the afternoon sun broke through the clouds. The route Joseph had described would take her through the foothills of the Elkhorn Mountains, rugged country where she'd have to rely on her memory and the markers left by Joseph's cousin. As the miles passed beneath her horse's hooves, Katherine found her thoughts returning to Isaiah. Had he sensed the danger ahead? Would he recognize the signs of an ambush before it was too late? The questions drove her forward, pushing harder than prudence might dictate. By late afternoon, she'd reached the lightning-struck pine Joseph had mentioned. The massive tree stood like a sentinel, its upper half blackened and twisted from some long-ago storm. Katherine turned west as instructed, following a faint trail that wound between rocky outcroppings. The Twin Peaks appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent, their snow-capped summits catching the golden light. Katherine estimated she had perhaps 2 hours of daylight left, barely enough time to reach the valley before dark. She pushed her mount faster, ignoring the growing ache in her muscles. Years of comfortable town life had softened her, making this hard ride more punishing than she wanted to admit. But the thought of Isaiah riding into an ambush kept her moving forward. The trail descended sharply into a narrow valley just as the sun touched the western mountains. Katherine reined in her horse, scanning the landscape for any sign of Isaiah. The valley stretched before her, empty and silent except for the whisper of wind through the pines. Had she missed him? Was he already approaching the canyon, unaware of the danger waiting there? A flicker of movement caught her eye, a rider emerging from the trees at the far end of the valley. Even at this distance, Katherine recognized Isaiah's broad-shouldered silhouette and the distinctive gait of his horse. "Isaiah," she called, her voice carrying across the open space between them. He reined in sharply, turning toward the sound. For a moment he seemed frozen in place, then he urged his horse toward her at a gallop. "Katherine," he called as he drew closer, disbelief evident in his voice. "What in God's name, ambush?" She cut him off, breathless from exertion and relief. "Thompson's men, waiting at Split Rock Canyon." Isaiah's expression hardened as he brought his horse alongside hers. "How do you know?" Katherine quickly explained Joseph's warning and her decision to intercept him. "There's another route to Helena," she finished, "longer but safer." Isaiah was already scanning the surrounding hills, his posture alert. "You shouldn't have come alone." "If Thompson's men had found you, then I'd have been in the same danger you're in," Katherine interrupted. "The treaty is too important to risk." For a moment, Isaiah looked as though he might argue further, but then his expression softened. "Stubborn woman," he said, but there was admiration in his voice. "So I've been told," Katherine replied with a faint smile. "Joseph's cousin marked an alternate trail. We should reach it before dark if we ride now." Isaiah hesitated. "Katherine, you've already ridden hard today." "Return to Willow Creek, I'll find the trail." "Absolutely not," Katherine said firmly. "I didn't come all this way to turn back now. Besides, 2 riders have a better chance than 1 if we encounter trouble." Isaiah studied her determined face, then nodded once. "All right, but we ride together." As they set off toward the northern edge of the valley where Joseph had said they would find the hidden trail, Katherine was acutely aware of Isaiah's concerned glances. Her body ached from the unaccustomed hours in the saddle, but she kept pace with him, refusing to show weakness. "You're full of surprises, Katherine Lawson," Isaiah said as they picked their way through a rocky stretch. "Not many school teachers would don buckskins and ride into the wilderness on a moment's notice." "Not many school teachers have been accused of inciting Indian uprisings either," Katherine pointed out wryly. "I seem to be exceptional in all the wrong ways." Isaiah's laugh was unexpected and warm. "I wouldn't say wrong. Unconventional, perhaps. Is that a polite way of saying scandalous?" Katherine asked. "It's a sincere way of saying admirable," Isaiah corrected, his blue eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. Katherine looked away first, uncomfortable with the warmth that spread through her at his words. "The trail should be just ahead," she said, changing the subject. "Joseph said to look for 3 stones stacked as a marker." They found the cairn as the last light faded from the sky. The trail beyond was barely visible, a narrow path winding up into the dense forest covering the mountainside. "We'll need to make camp soon," Isaiah observed, eyeing the darkening sky. "Trying to follow this trail at night would be foolhardy." Katherine nodded her agreement, though the thought of delaying their journey to Helena troubled her. "There's a clearing about half a mile ahead, if I remember correctly. Morning Star showed me once while gathering juniper berries." The clearing proved smaller than Katherine remembered, but it offered shelter from the wind, and a small stream provided water for their horses. Isaiah quickly and efficiently set about making camp, gathering firewood and preparing a simple meal from the provisions in his saddlebags. Katherine watched him work, struck by the competence in his movements. This was clearly a man accustomed to life on the trail, at ease in the wilderness in a way that spoke of years of experience. "You're staring," Isaiah observed without looking up from the small fire he was building. Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was just thinking that you seem very at home out here. 10 years of drifting will do that," he replied, striking a match. "You learn to make yourself comfortable wherever you land." As the flames caught and grew, Isaiah settled back, offering Katherine a strip of jerky and a biscuit from his provisions. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the crackling fire and distant call of an owl the only sounds in the gathering darkness. "Tell me about those 10 years, Katherine finally said. "Where did you go after St. Louis?" Isaiah considered her request, his face thoughtful in the firelight. "West, mostly. Worked cattle drives in Texas, did some mining in Colorado, even tried my hand at trapping in Wyoming." A faint smile touched his lips. "Wasn't particularly good at that last one. And you never practiced law again?" Katherine asked. Isaiah poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing upward. "Hard to practice law when your reputation's been destroyed. The men who framed me made sure my name was mud in every courtroom from St. Louis to San Francisco." "What exactly happened?" Katherine pressed gently. "You've never said." Isaiah was quiet for so long that Katherine thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, as if the memories themselves were painful to touch. "I represented a Lakota chief in a land dispute similar to this one. Treaty-protected land, valuable mineral rights. A congressman's brother wanted it for mining." His jaw tightened. "They couldn't beat us legally, the treaty was ironclad, so they came after me instead. Forged documents appeared with my signature, suggesting I'd taken bribes to suppress evidence." Katherine listened, horrified by the injustice he described. "By the time I proved the documents were forged, the damage was done. The Lakota lost their land, I lost my practice, and the congressman's brother got his mine." Isaiah's eyes reflected the dancing flames. 3 months later, the chief who had trusted me was found dead under suspicious circumstances." "That's why this case matters so much to you," Katherine realized aloud. "It's not just about the Cheyenne. It's about setting something right," Isaiah admitted. "About using what I know to fight the same battle, but maybe with a different outcome this time." Katherine reached across the space between them, placing her hand on his arm. "I'm sorry for what happened to you." Isaiah covered her hand with his touch warm and steady. "Don't be. If none of that had happened, I wouldn't have been passing through Willow Creek at the exact moment you needed someone to stand beside you." The implications of his words hung in the air between them. Katherine was suddenly very aware of how alone they were, how intimate this moment felt in the circle of firelight with the vast wilderness surrounding them. "We should get some rest," she said, gently withdrawing her hand. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Isaiah nodded, though something in his eyes suggested he'd noticed her retreat. "I'll take first watch, you sleep." "We don't need to keep watch," Katherine protested. "We're miles from the main trail." "Humor me," Isaiah said. "I'll wake you in a few hours." Too tired to argue, Katherine wrapped herself in the blanket Isaiah offered and settled near the fire. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was slow to come. Her mind kept returning to Isaiah's story, to the pain and bitterness she'd glimpsed beneath his controlled exterior. How many times had he been disappointed? How many battles had he lost before he'd stopped fighting altogether? And what had made him start again for a schoolteacher he barely knew and a treaty that wasn't his concern? These questions followed Katherine into restless dreams, where she stood alone against a faceless crowd while Isaiah watched from a distance, unable to reach her through some invisible barrier. She woke with a start to find Isaiah gently shaking her shoulder. "Katherine," he whispered. "Someone's coming."